The Timekeeper's Daughter. Chapter 1. The Clock That Stopped. The town of Drelith was not a place where strange things happened. It was a quiet place, wrapped in the rhythm of days and nights, the tolling of the bell tower marking each hour with the precision of a heartbeat. Merchants laid out their wares at dawn. Children ran through cobblestone alleys at midday, and the old sat on benches counting the strokes of the evening bells as though they were counting the time left in their own lives. To the people of Drelith, time was not just a measure, it was a certainty, a law. Nothing could touch it, nothing could break it, until the day it stopped. Elara, a girl of 15, had always been sensitive to the flow of time in ways she couldn't explain. She would sometimes awaken a moment before the bell rang, or know when a candle was about to sputter out. But she had never spoken of it aloud. It was just a feeling, a tickle in her bones. Her mother called her dreamy, her father called her strange, but neither suspected the truth that lived inside her. That morning had begun like any other. The square was crowded with vendors shouting their prices, the clatter of carts rolling over cobblestones, the chatter of townsfolk bartering and laughing. Elara had been running errands for her mother, clutching a small basket of apples. The sun was high, and the bell tower's gears were already creaking, preparing to strike noon. She paused at the fountain, the spray of cool water sparkling in the light. Children darted around her, chasing each other. An old man leaned on his cane, counting the moments until the bell. And then it happened. As the bell began its great swing, a tremor shot through Elara's chest like the pulling of a string. The sound of the world fractured. She dropped her basket, and apples rolled across the stones, but no one bent to pick them up, because no one moved at all. The merchant, with his mouth open in mid-bargain, froze like a statue. The old man's cane hovered just above the cobblestones, never touching. A bird that had been cutting across the square hung suspended in the air, its wings outstretched like painted feathers. The fountain's spray had become glass beads, droplets fixed in place, sparkling but unmoving. Elara's breath caught. The air around her was thick, heavy, silent in a way that pressed against her ears. The only sound was the thundering of her own heartbeat. She stumbled back, her hands trembling, and the string inside her chest thrummed again. She reached for the bird without thinking, her fingers brushing its feathers. It was solid but still, as though carved from marble. She gasped and drew her hand back. What is this?" she whispered, her voice startlingly loud in the silence. She turned, desperate, but there was no answer. Only a world caught in a painting, unmoving and eternal. And then, just as suddenly as it had stopped, the string snapped. The world lurched forward. The bird shot off into the sky, the old man's cane clacked against the stones, the children screamed with laughter. No one noticed that anything had changed. Only Elara stood trembling, her knees weak, her chest aching as if she had been holding her breath too long. She stumbled home, her mother scolding her for the bruised apples and her lateness, but she barely heard. That night, as she lay in her narrow bed, she could not sleep. She kept replaying the moment, the silence, the stillness, the power that had poured through her veins. The next day, it happened again. This time on the road outside of town, where a carriage wheel had splintered and horses reared wildly. A little boy stood frozen in the path of the charging beasts, his mother screaming. Elara felt the string in her chest pulled tighter, and before she knew it, the world stilled. The boy's terror froze on his face, the horses suspended mid-leap, dirt hanging in the air. Her hands shook, but she ran to the boy, scooping him up and dragging him out of the way. The weight of him was real, though he was frozen like the rest. And then, with a gasp, the world lurched forward again. The boy tumbled into his mother's arms just as the horses crashed down where he had stood. The crowd shouted, some calling it a miracle, others too stunned to question. Only Elara knew the truth. She had pulled time itself like threads in a loom. But with the wonder came fear. That night she felt weak, her skin clammy, her bones aching as though she had aged years in hours. She barely managed to lift her spoon at dinner. Her father grumbled about her laziness, but her mother only touched her forehead and murmured about exhaustion. Elara said nothing. Days passed, and she avoided using the power. But whispers in Drelith began to grow. The old spoke of strange silences, of the feeling that the world paused for heartbeats at a time. Merchants muttered of uncanny coincidences, of accidents averted, of deaths delayed. And when Elara walked the streets, she felt eyes on her, suspicion coiling like smoke. One evening, as she sat alone by the fountain, a cloaked stranger approached. His face was hidden, but his voice was deep, resonant. "You felt it, didn't you? The gears of the world stuttering." Elara froze. "I don't know what you mean." He leaned close, his shadow falling over her. "Don't lie, child. The clock inside you has begun to tick, and when it ticks too loud, others will hear." Before she could reply, he was gone, vanishing into the crowd as though he had never been. That night she dreamed of clocks, endless rows of them, their hands spinning wildly. Some cracked, some shattered, some running backward. And in the center stood a great clock with no hands at all, its face smooth and blank, yet its chimes thundered through her bones. She awoke, gasping, sweat soaking her sheets. The string in her chest pulsed painfully as if warning her. The next morning she resolved to test it. She slipped away into the woods beyond the town, where no one would see. She found a stream and tossed a pebble into it, watching the ripples spread. Then she closed her eyes and reached for the string inside her chest. The world froze. The ripples halted mid-circle, droplets suspended in the air. Elara gasped, her breath fogging in the silence. She walked across the stream, touching the droplets, watching them remain fixed. She laughed with wonder, but the laugh broke into a sob, because she knew it came with a cost. Already her limbs ached, her head throbbed, her body begging her to stop. She released it, and the stream rushed on, the pebble tumbling to the bottom. Elara collapsed to her knees, trembling. She whispered to herself, "What am I?" The trees did not answer, but somewhere, faint and distant, she thought she heard the toll of a clock that did not belong to Drelith, nor to any place she had ever known. It echoed inside her skull like a promise or a warning. And so began the legend of the Timekeeper's daughter. Chapter 2. Frozen Moments. The days after the woods felt heavier, as though the world itself knew Elara carried something she shouldn't. She kept her head low, running errands, helping her mother, avoiding the fountain and the bell tower. Yet the string in her chest pulsed more often, tugging like a restless heartbeat that didn't belong to her. She tried to resist, but time had its own way of luring her. It happened first on the bridge. A wagon loaded with barrels creaked as it crossed the wooden planks, its wheels wobbling dangerously. Children ran alongside, laughing, not noticing how close the wagon came to the railing. Elara's chest tightened. She knew what was coming. The wheel splintered, the wagon tipped, and a boy stumbled into its path. The string snapped inside her. The world froze. Horses hung mid-scream, hooves suspended inches from the boy's small face. The driver's mouth was open, his hands tugging the reins that no longer moved. Splinters of wood hung like needles in the air. Elara moved without thinking. She pushed the boy aside, her hands shaking, then heaved at the wagon's edge. It didn't budge. Her body felt drained already, but she forced her strength, dragging the boy far enough that when the string released, the wagon crashed down harmlessly. The boy's mother shrieked, scooping him into her arms. The crowd surged with cries of relief. Some said the wagon had tilted just enough to miss him. Others called it a blessing. Only Elara staggered to the side, clutching her ribs, her vision swimming. She barely made it home that evening. Her mother pressed cool cloths to her forehead, whispering of fever, of weakness. Elara only nodded, unable to confess that it wasn't sickness. It was the cost of stealing moments. But time was not finished testing her. A week later, Fire broke out in the baker's shop. Flames licked the shutters, smoke poured into the street. Townsfolk screamed, water buckets sloshed, and above it all the baker's daughter cried from the second-floor window. She was trapped. The flames surged higher. Elara's chest tore with pain as the string pulled taut. Her knees buckled, but she knew she couldn't stand by. The world froze. Fire stopped in mid-curl, flames like painted ribbons against the air. Sparks hung as glowing embers, still but dangerous. The girl in the window was frozen in her scream, tears on her cheeks like crystal beads. Elara's legs wobbled, but she forced herself forward. She climbed the outer beams of the shop, scraping her hands raw. Each movement felt like dragging through mud, the silence pressing harder against her ears. She reached the window, heaved the girl into her arms, and began the descent. Her limbs trembled so badly she nearly dropped the child, but she clung on. The moment her boots hit the ground, the string inside her snapped loose. The world lurched forward. Fire roared, smoke burst upward, but the girl was safe in her mother's arms. The crowd erupted in cheers, calling Elara a heroine. The baker fell to his knees, thanking her with tears streaming down his face, but Elara barely heard. She collapsed in the alley, her skin pale, her breath shallow. Every time she froze the world, it felt as though something was being carved out of her, piece by piece. That night, as she lay in bed, she whispered to herself, "How many moments can I steal before time takes me whole?" The answer came not from her thoughts, but from her dreams. Again she found herself in the hall of endless clocks, their hands spinning, breaking, or stuck. The faceless great clock loomed above her, its chimes echoing in her bones. But this time, she was not alone. A figure stepped from the shadows, a woman cloaked in silver, her eyes glowing faintly like embers. Her voice was like bells, sharp and final. "You meddle with threads that are not yours to pull." Elara's throat tightened. "I saved them. The boy, the girl, they would be dead." The woman's expression did not change. "And for each life stolen from death, something else must pay. You are cutting fragments from yourself. The clock demands balance." Elara trembled. "Then why do I have this gift? Why me?" The woman tilted her head, her voice low. "You are not gifted, child. You are burdened, and the more you use it, the more you will fade, until only silence remains." Elara tried to reach for her to ask more, but the woman dissolved like smoke and she woke gasping in her bed. The following days, Elara stayed away from the crowds, fearing another tug on the string. She lingered at the edge of town, staring at the river, her hands cold. Yet fate never waits for permission. A storm rolled in one afternoon, black clouds twisting, winds howling. Lightning struck the forest and a tree splintered across the road just as a caravan approached. Horses screamed, wheels skidded, the tree collapsing toward them. The string in Elara's chest yanked so hard she cried out. She fell to her knees, clutching her heart. The world froze again. Rain hung in the air like silver needles, lightning frozen mid-flash. The tree tilted in slow, eternal fall, its trunk groaning though sound no longer followed. The travelers in the caravan sat wide-eyed, mouths open in screams that made no sound. Elara stumbled forward, her legs barely working. She pushed at the horses, tugged the caravan, but it was too heavy. Desperation burned her chest. She placed her hands against the tree, and for a moment, she thought she felt it shift. But her body gave out. She collapsed to her knees, tears streaking her face. "Move," she whispered, "please, move." And somehow it did. A small tilt, just enough. She dragged the lead horse aside, forcing her body until it obeyed. The caravan shifted inches out of the tree's path. When the string snapped, the world roared back. The tree crashed to the ground, splinters flying, but the caravan was safe. Travelers cried in relief, calling it providence. Some swore they had seen the girl with the dark hair push the tree aside. Others thought it impossible. Elara could not stay to hear their thanks. She fled into the woods, collapsing under the dripping branches, her body racked with pain. She lay in the mud, gasping, her vision dark. For hours she hovered between sleep and waking, the chimes of the great clock ringing in her mind. Each sound felt heavier, closer. She knew what it meant. Her hours were being counted faster than others. By dawn, she dragged herself home, her mother's tears and her father's scolding mixing into a blur. They spoke of healers, of herbs, of weakness. But Elara knew no herb could cure the truth. She had stolen too many moments already, and though she swore she would resist, though she promised herself she would let fate play as it must, she also knew the truth. When she saw someone about to die, she could never stand still. Time was her enemy. But it was also her chain, and with every frozen moment the chain grew tighter. Chapter 3. Cost of Power. Elara had begun to count the changes. They were small at first. A stiffness in her fingers when she tried to braid her hair, a faint ache in her knees after walking home from the market. She told herself it was nothing, that she was imagining it. But with each frozen moment, the ache deepened. The mirror showed shadows under her eyes, her lips pale, her skin thinning like parchment. Her mother fussed endlessly. "You're too thin, Elara. You've been working too hard. Maybe you're growing too fast." She would press warm bread into Elara's hands, tuck blankets around her at night, mutter charms to ward off weakness. Her father, less tender, scolded her for laziness. "Stop daydreaming, girl. You've got to be strong. The world doesn't wait for you." If only he knew the truth. The world did wait for her, and every time it did, it carved another year from her bones. She avoided crowds now. She chose quiet paths through the woods, lingered by the river, hid in the meadows where only birds and insects lived. She prayed that if she avoided danger, the string in her chest would stay silent. But fate was cruel. It always found her. One morning, she came upon a shepherd boy by the cliffs. His flock had strayed too close to the edge, and as he scrambled to gather them, the earth beneath him gave way. Rocks tumbled, the boy pitched forward with a scream. The string tore inside her. The world froze. Elara staggered, clutching her chest, her breath shallow. She crawled to the boy, grabbing his arm, hauling with all the strength she had left. His body was stiff as stone, heavier than she expected. Her muscles burned, her vision blurred, but she dragged him inch by inch back from the crumbling ledge. Her head throbbed. Her hands shook violently. Her lips tasted of iron, though she hadn't bitten them. The silence pressed tighter, so heavy it felt like the air itself was trying to smother her. She collapsed beside him just as the string released. The boy gasped, rolling onto the grass, sobbing in shock. Rocks thundered down the cliffside where he would have fallen. He looked at her with wide, terrified eyes. "You saved me. How did you—" But before he could finish, Elara turned away, too weak to answer. She stumbled down the hill, her body screaming with pain. That night, she found a new horror in the mirror, a streak of silver in her dark hair. Only a strand, but undeniable. She touched it with trembling fingers, tears welling in her eyes. She was only 15, yet her reflection showed the weight of decades. The next day, her vision blurred as she walked through the market. She bumped into a merchant's cart and nearly fell. The man cursed her, but she barely heard. Her head spun, her ears rang with the chime of invisible bells. She clutched a wall until the world steadied. And then came the whispers. She didn't know when they had started, but soon she could hear them in the silence between heartbeats. Not voices of people, but whispers of time itself, low, endless murmurs of moments slipping past. Sometimes they hissed warnings. Sometimes they sang like lullabies. Once she swore she heard them call her name. Elara. She woke in the night, clutching her chest, gasping for breath. The string inside her pulsed like a heartbeat, too fast, too frantic. She thought of the silver-haired woman from her dream, of the faceless clock that tolled without hands. "You are fading," the woman had said. But how could she stop? Could she let children burn, mothers grieve, lives shatter, when she had the power to change it? The next test came without warning. The river had swollen after heavy rains. Townsfolk crowded the banks, shouting as a cart had tipped from the bridge, its passengers trapped in the rushing water. A young man clung to the edge, struggling to hold on to his sister as the current dragged them both down. Elara's chest convulsed. The string yanked tight. "No," she whispered, tears already brimming. "Please, no, not again." But the world froze. The roar of the river cut off. Water stilled mid-crash, droplets like shards of glass suspended in the air. The siblings hung frozen, terror etched on their faces. Elara stepped onto the riverbed, her feet sinking into mud that no longer flowed. Her body trembled with exhaustion before she even reached them. She pried the girl's hand from her brother's wrist, dragged her toward the bank. The weight nearly crushed her. She slipped, fell, coughed, but forced herself on. Then she went back for the boy. Her vision narrowed to pinpricks. Her muscles screamed. She hauled them both inch by inch until their bodies rested on the frozen mud of the riverbank. Her chest seized, her throat burned, her knees gave out, and then the string snapped. The river thundered forward. The siblings coughed, gasped, clutched each other in disbelief. The crowd on the bridge erupted in cheers and cries of wonder. Someone shouted Elara's name. Others rushed to pull the siblings to safety. But Elara was already gone, stumbling into the trees, collapsing behind a thicket. She vomited into the mud, her body racked with tremors. She wiped her mouth with a shaking hand and found streaks of blood across her palm. When she returned home that night, her hair bore not one but 3 silver strands. Her eyes, once bright hazel, seemed dimmer. Her mother cried out in alarm, insisting on fetching a healer. Elara refused. No healer could mend this. She lay awake, staring at the rafters, listening to the whispers of time. "Elara, you are unraveling." She pressed her palms to her ears, tears running down her temples. "Then what am I supposed to do? Let them die?" The whispers offered no answer. Only the endless tolling of the great clock echoed in her mind. From then on, every use of her power was a gamble. Each freeze left her weaker. Each moment stolen carved another mark upon her body. She began to notice lines around her eyes, faint but deepening. Her reflection looked older than her years, as though time itself was punishing her for daring to master it. But still, when fate struck, she could not stay still. A falling roof beam, a runaway cart, a lantern toppling in the night, again and again. She answered the pull. Again and again, she stole moments, saved lives, and paid the price. Until one day she overheard townsfolk whispering, "She's not normal, that girl. Have you seen her eyes? They look older. They say she appears where accidents happen, as if she knows beforehand." Her blood ran cold. They were beginning to see. She hurried home, shutting herself in her room. She wept until her pillow was soaked, her body shaking with fear. She thought of the silver-haired woman, of the warning. When the clock ticks too loud, others will hear. It was no longer just about the cost to herself. If the town turned against her, if they discovered the truth, she would not only lose her strength, she would lose everything. Yet, even then, she knew. The next time someone screamed, she would freeze the world again. She couldn't stop. She couldn't let go. Because Elara was the Timekeeper's daughter, and every gift she gave to others was another piece of herself lost to the ticking of the clock. Chapter 4. Time's Wrath. The whispers had grown louder. They no longer drifted only at night but seeped into the daylight, murmurs beneath the sound of market stalls and tolling bells. Elara tried to drown them out, pressing her palms to her ears, but the voices of time always found her. And then one day, they were not whispers anymore. It began with a shadow. Elara was walking the narrow lane behind the baker's shop, clutching a loaf of bread for her mother. The sky was clear, but a sudden darkness swept over her. She glanced up. No clouds, no storm, only a figure standing at the far end of the alley. He wore armor the color of tarnished bronze, etched with shifting runes that seemed to crawl across the surface like insects. His face was hidden behind a helm, and from his gauntlets trailed faint streams of light, like hourglass sand spilling upward instead of down. Elara froze, her breath hitching. The string in her chest tugged, but differently this time, not a call to freeze the world, but a warning, sharp and cold. The figure raised a hand. The air thickened. The sound of bells crashed inside her skull, and for the briefest instant, the alley warped. Walls bent like molten wax, cobblestones shivered like rippling water. And then he spoke. Time thief. The word sliced through her like a blade. Elara stumbled back. I don't know what you mean. But the helm tilted as if mocking her. You meddle with the stream. You steal seconds, minutes, hours that were not yours to take. You are marked. Before she could reply, the figure stepped forward. With each footfall, the ground cracked, cobblestones aging to dust beneath his boots. Elara bolted. She sprinted into the market square, weaving through stalls, heart pounding. She dared not look back, but she felt the weight of him behind her, each step bending the air, warping the world. She reached the fountain, and the world froze. Not because she willed it, but because he did. The crowd halted mid-motion, vendors' mouths locked open, pigeons stilled in the air. Only she and the armored figure moved. Panic flooded her. She pulled at the string in her chest, trying to seize control, but the silence was different. Thicker, stronger. It wasn't hers. The figure raised a weapon that looked both sword and hourglass, its blade shimmering like liquid light. The stream must remain pure. You have fractured it too often. Elara stumbled backward, clutching her chest. I was saving them. Children, families. They would have died. The helm tilted again. Fate does not ask your permission. Every life spared creates a ripple. Every ripple births chaos. He advanced. She gasped, pulling harder at the string inside her. Her body screamed, her veins burning with fire, but at last the silence cracked. The fountain's spray froze, the figure staggered, the alley warped again. For the first time, she wasn't freezing only the world, she was freezing him. Elara turned and fled. She ran until her lungs burned, until the silver in her hair felt like it was spreading across her scalp. She collapsed in the meadow beyond town, gasping, her hands shaking violently. That night, the dream returned. The hall of clocks, the faceless great clock, and the silver-haired woman. But this time, the woman wasn't alone. 3 armored figures stood beside her, each helm glowing with faint light, each holding weapons forged of time itself. They have found you, the woman said. Elara fell to her knees. Who are they? The Chrono-Guardians, the woman replied. Wardens of the stream. They are not cruel, but they are merciless. To them you are a wound in the river of hours. A wound must be sealed. Elara's voice cracked. Then help me. Tell me what to do. The woman's gaze softened just for a moment. You cannot run forever. You must decide whether to yield to time or defy it. The dream dissolved. The following days were torture. She could feel them watching. Reflections shifted in windows. Shadows lingered longer than they should. Once, as she drew water from the well, the surface rippled and showed not her face but the helm of a guardian staring back. And still, fate demanded her gift. A tower scaffold collapsed during repairs, workers dangling from ropes, wood splintering toward the crowd below. The string yanked at her chest and she froze the world again. She dragged men to safety, shielded a child beneath her cloak, and when the silence broke, no one died. But the cost was brutal. Her hands trembled too violently to hold a cup that night. Her mother wept, begging her to eat. Her father looked at her with fear he tried to mask as anger. And when she woke the next morning, there were silver strands, not just in her hair, but her eyelashes. The Guardians came again at dusk. This time there were 3. They appeared in the square, armor glinting, weapons humming with the resonance of endless clocks. The townsfolk did not see them. To ordinary eyes, the square was untouched. But Elara saw every detail. She froze the world and ran. They froze it too and followed. The chase spilled through alleys over rooftops across the river. Time itself fractured around them. Windows of past and future flickered. Shadows of what had been and what could be playing out in ghostly flashes. At last, cornered on the bell tower's steps, Elara turned to face them. Her chest ached, her body weak, but fire burned in her eyes. "You say I'm a wound," she whispered, "but I saved them. Isn't that worth something?" One guardian lifted his weapon. "Every thread you cut must be rewoven. For each life spared, another pays. Balance is law." "Then take me," she said through tears, "but don't make me stop." The guardians hesitated. For the first time she thought she saw uncertainty in their stillness. But then the toll of the bell thundered above them, and in the reverberations they vanished like smoke. Elara collapsed on the steps, her face wet with tears, the string in her chest frayed but unbroken. She knew then they would not stop. The Guardians would hunt her until the end. And each time she froze the world to defy them, her own end drew closer. The city was burning. Smoke and flames painted the skyline in colors of crimson and ash. Screams echoed through the streets as chaos erupted, buildings collapsing, people fleeing with terror in their eyes. It was not an ordinary war, nor a natural disaster. It was the unraveling of time itself. Clocks spun wildly, day turned to night and back again within breaths, and shadows of alternate realities bled into existence before dissolving back into nothingness. Time was collapsing, folding in on itself because the Guardians had been unleashed and their wrath could not be contained. In the center of it all stood Elara, her body frail, breath shallow, but her eyes still burning with the stubborn glow of defiance. She had always known this day would come, the day when her gift would demand its final price. Every freeze, every stolen moment, every act of defiance against the natural flow had been drawing her closer to this. The Timekeeper's laws were absolute. She had broken them, again and again. And now the world trembled because of it. The Guardians descended like shadows made of shattered glass, their forms constantly flickering, sometimes appearing as cloaked figures, other times as skeletal beings wreathed in lightless fire. Their voices were not voices at all, but the grinding of gears, the toll of endless clocks, the echo of eternity. They moved as one, their hands raised, stretching across the broken city. Wherever they touched, moments unraveled. People froze mid-step, laughter cut off, tears halted on cheeks. Whole streets dissolved into strands of memory and dust. Elara's knees nearly buckled, but she forced herself forward, clutching the broken watch that had once belonged to her father. The clock that had started it all. Its cracked face still ticked, stubbornly, though its hands now moved against reason, swinging backward and forward at once. It was the last tether she had, the last instrument through which her power could flow. She knew the Guardians would not stop until she was gone, but if she fell now, the world would fall with her. "Run, Elara!" someone shouted from behind her. She turned to see Marcus, his face bloodied, his arm wrapped tightly around a young child who clung to him. His eyes locked on hers, wide with desperation. "You can't fight them. You'll die." "I know," Elara whispered, though her voice barely carried over the thunderous roar of collapsing time. She wanted to tell him more, that she loved him, that she was grateful for every moment he had stood by her side, even when the truth of her curse had nearly driven him away. But there was no time for words anymore, only action. The Guardians surged, their forms bending the air. She raised the watch, her body screaming in pain. The last few freezes had nearly broken her completely. Her heart raced too fast, her veins burned with fire, her vision swam. But she pressed the mechanism anyway. Time stopped. The world froze mid-collapse. Flames became still ribbons of red in the air. Screams turned to silent echoes. Rubble hung suspended above the streets. The Guardians, too, halted in mid-motion, their shifting forms caught between dimensions. All was silent. The silence pressed against her like a weight, crushing, suffocating. She could feel the sands of her own life pouring out faster now, pouring into the stillness, fueling it. Her knees buckled, but she pushed forward, stumbling across frozen streets, weaving through motionless fragments of reality. At the heart of the city stood the Grand Tower, once the great clock tower that had kept time for generations. Its gears had broken long ago, but now it pulsed with a strange light, threads of time itself pouring from its shattered face. This was the epicenter of the collapse, the place where she had to make her final stand. Every step closer, she felt the pull grow stronger. Time wanted to reclaim her, to drag her into its depths. She saw visions flicker around her as she walked. Her childhood, her father's smile as he handed her the watch, her first freeze, the faces of everyone she had saved, and with each vision came another, one she had not lived yet. A glimpse of the world she could leave behind if she succeeded. Children laughing in streets that weren't burning, the sea shimmering under a calm sun, clocks ticking in harmony once again. Tears burned in her eyes. She wanted to see it, to live it, but she knew she never would. Her hands trembled as she climbed the broken steps of the tower. The mechanism inside was still turning, massive gears grinding against one another, though no power remained to drive them. At its core, the heart of time pulsed like a burning star, unstable, broken. If she could pour her last freeze into it, channel all her remaining life, she could reset it. She could restore the flow. Her body screamed as she approached, her lungs barely drawing in air. She knew this was the final threshold. One last step, one last act, and everything would end. Elara! The voice came from behind her, soft, trembling. She turned to see Marcus standing in the doorway of the shattered tower. He had left the child in safety, but his body was broken, his steps uneven. His eyes locked on hers with desperation and pain. "You don't have to do this," he whispered, his voice cracked. "We'll find another way. Please don't leave me." Her heart ached. She wanted nothing more than to collapse into his arms, to believe his words, to pretend that another way existed. But she had always known this moment was inevitable. Her gift had never been hers to keep. It had been borrowed time. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking as she turned away. "But I was never meant to stay." He took a step forward, his hand reaching out, but she was already pressing the watch into the heart of the mechanism. The gears screamed as light surged through them, threads of time whipping outward like blades. The Guardians broke free of her freeze, their shrieks echoing like thunder as they surged into the tower. But it was too late. She poured everything she had left into the freeze. The world shook. The Guardians screamed, their forms unraveling into dust. The city dissolved into strands of light, then reformed, whole and unbroken. Flames disappeared, screams faded, rubble rebuilt itself. The people returned to motion, none of them knowing they had ever been on the brink of annihilation. At the center of it all, Elara stood, her body wreathed in light. Her hair lifted as though caught in a breeze, her skin glowing faintly. Marcus shouted her name, but his voice grew faint in her ears. She felt herself dissolving, becoming part of the very fabric she had restored. Her last thought was not of fear, but of peace. She had saved them. The gears turned steadily once more. The great clock tower chimed, its sound echoing across the world. Time had been restored, and Elara, the Timekeeper's daughter, was gone. But her sacrifice lingered in every ticking second, in every heartbeat, in every sunrise that followed. She had given her final hour so that the world could have all the hours it needed.